Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination news, newsmakers, talking points. A happy Holi to each and every one of you out there. But first, I want to tell you what's our big talking point this Tuesday night. Donald Trump has just shifted the war goalposts again. Now says he's ready to support armed groups in Iran to topple the government. Is he daydreaming or does he have a plan? Among my special guests is the noted news presenter Mehdi Hasan, joins me from Washington. I'll also look at what role should India now be really playing, particularly with oil prices rising. Syed Akbaruddin, who's tracked the area for years, will join me. Special guests as always, but first, let's bring you the top 10 developments on that escalating war in West Asia. The death toll in Iran from the ongoing conflict with the United States and Israel has risen to over 780. Iranian agencies claim the country has faced more than 1,000 strikes with over 500 sites hit since the war began on 28 February. With Iran attacking US-linked sites across the Gulf region, the US decides to shut its embassies in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan. Non-emergency personnel in these embassies are ordered to leave immediately. A top Iranian official has said that Tehran is ready to hold negotiations with the US and Israel with dignity. Earlier, President Trump claimed that Tehran requested talks after their leadership and command structure was hit, but claimed it was too late. With Iran shutting down the strategic Straits of Hormuz, government sources say India currently has crude oil and petroleum product stocks sufficient for 50 days. The government, however, exploring alternative suppliers to meet the demand. A day after Tehran claimed its nuclear facility had been struck, global watchdog IAEA confirms that Iran's Natanz nuclear enrichment site sustained some damage, but any radiation leak is ruled out for now. Iran holds a funeral procession for victims of the strike on the girls' school in Minab. Thousands of Iranians attend the funeral procession for over 160 Iranian schoolgirls killed in the US-Israel strikes on Saturday. Israel rules out sending boots on the ground into Iran, but its forces have crossed into Lebanese territory in operations against the Hezbollah, which has aligned with Iran and fired missiles towards Israel. President Trump intensifies his criticism of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer for refusing to allow the use of British bases for strikes and for voicing concerns over Washington's actions. Trump says Starmer has not been helpful, expresses disappointment over the current state of US-UK relations. Prime Minister Modi steps up his outreach to Gulf nations amidst the escalating war. Over the past 48 hours, he has spoken to the heads of state of 8 countries, stressing the safety and security of Indian nationals residing in the region. Indian nationals stranded in the Middle East begin returning home with flight operations partly resuming. Several commercial services are bringing passengers back to India after days of airspace closures and widespread cancellations disrupted travel across the Gulf. But the big story that's breaking at the moment, US officials now saying that Donald Trump is ready to support armed Iranian groups to overthrow the government in the Republic. A short while ago, Israeli forces have targeted Iran's assembly of experts who were tasked to choose the next leader of Iran, leading to possibility of more deaths in the high-ranking members of the regime in Iran. The Israeli army also conducting a fresh wave of strikes in Tehran, Qom and Isfahan, targeting ballistic missile manufacturing sites as well. So clearly America not letting up and carrying on the escalation, with Israel really in a frontal role at the moment. So a US official claiming that Trump is open to supporting armed groups. This is another change in goalposts by the US president. Only yesterday he said that he was not interested in regime change, was not the goal. He wanted Israel to end, wanted Iran to end its nuclear enrichment program. I want to go to guests who are joining me at this moment from the ground. Mayan Hoffman, journalist from Tel Aviv, is with us. I want to come to you, Mayan, for a moment. What are you picking up at the moment? Has it been a relatively calm day in Israel? Yesterday, we saw a series of missiles and drones directed at different parts of your country.
Yes, it's been much calmer today than yesterday, although there have been certainly some sirens that took place later, kind of mid-afternoon today. Most of the action has actually been up north, Hezbollah rockets and drones being fired into northern Israel, where Israel is obviously also operating against Hezbollah in Lebanon. The most exciting attacks have gone the other direction, Israel operating in Iran. We saw the target of 88 people coming together, the municipal votes to vote for the new supreme leader. And of course, Israel managed to take them all out at the same time. That's been a moment of celebration here in Israel. But by and large, yeah, it's been a bit of a quieter Purim holiday than we expected.
So you're saying that Israel believes it has taken out all the Iranian leaders who had gathered to elect a successor to Khamenei. Is that what you're saying? Is that what Israeli sources are confirming, that their attacks have targeted that assembly that had gathered to elect a successor to Khamenei, and that they've been taken out?
Well, they haven't been able to confirm that all 88 have been taken out, but they've certainly been able to confirm that there was a direct strike on the building, and they assume that the majority, of course, have been, if not all of them, and that they were able to stop the vote today with Israeli intelligence and Israeli strikes.
Okay. Mayan Hoffman, thanks very much for joining me from there with that important piece of news. Meanwhile, Professor Zamir Abbas Jafri, the Al Mustafa International University in Qom, is joining me. I appreciate you joining us. You are in Qom, sir, which is the very place where that assembly was being held of senior Iranian clerics and members of the assembly to elect a new leader. The Israelis are claiming that they've targeted that area around the assembly a short while ago. What are you picking up in Qom itself? Have there been strikes in and around where you are, sir?
Thank you very much, Mr. Sardesai, for having me on the show. And yes, where I'm located, approximately, say around 1 kilometer approximately in that range, the attack took place. And I'm very surprised that we live in a world where people come on the show and they say that we have hit and killed people illegally, and with so much disdain, that they have so clean face, and they're able to say that completely illegal criminal attack. I mean, you can expect anything else. The first parliament of Iran after 1979, when the Islamic Revolution came about, the first parliament was bombed through terrorist attack by United States. So they have this history of killing people. They have only two ways. Either we'll kill you or you submit to us. We have the third way. We'll never submit to a tyrant. That is what the message of Iran is, and that is what the message of Imam Hussein was.
Can I understand from you, Professor, what you have been seeing around you in Qom? Are people now all restricted to their homes in bunkers? Because
No.
The United States is threatening, they've just threatened parts of Tehran and Isfahan, asking civilians to hide in safer places. Is there a fear factor of these bombs being dropped by the Israelis?
Mr. Sardesai, I'm glad that you asked this, because there are two ways. We are Shia Muslims. We never fear death. We love death. We love Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein taught us, whenever a tyrant comes in front of you and he asks you to bend down, you'd rather die on your feet rather than bend to a tyrant. So when I was driving here, I was driving towards my home and came back because of this show to this media center. The life was normal all around. And what is very surprising is, in Iran, after Iftar, which is Mahr Ramazan is going on, people gather in different roundabouts all over Iran. And in Qum, there are more than 50 locations where people gather on the streets in thousands, and they do matam and they do sinazani. And they say we are the lovers of Imam Hussein. You want to kill us? Yes. So there is a tyrant who's sitting there in Washington and Tel Aviv, and they want to scare you, and they think that they can scare you, and they think we fear death. No, we don't fear death. So if they want to be the tyrant and the aggressor, and they want to kill people illegally,
Right.
criminally, they will pay the price finally, because they're the most hated people in this world right now. That is for sure.
Okay. Professor Jaffrey, for joining me there with your very strong words. Stay safe. And I thank you very much for joining us even at this difficult time. Now, the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei over the weekend was projected by the United States-Israel alliance as a decisive strike. What it has done, though, is triggered even more confusion over America's real objectives. The Trump administration, particularly the president, is shifting goalposts all the time. Once speaking about regime change, then about nuclear missiles, now speaking about militias and nuclear weapons. Does Donald Trump really have a plan in mind, or is he simply walking into this war with Netanyahu taking the frontal role? Take a look at today's top story.
The killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in normal circumstances would be seen as a victory for an American president. But nothing about the killing was normal. The attacks took place without any legal backing, in the middle of negotiations that were being seen as a success. And now, President Donald Trump is having a tough time selling a war to the people of America who are wary of wars in distant lands. First of all, what is the objective? On Sunday, it was regime change.
Iranian military, police, to lay down your arms and receive full immunity or face certain death. It will be certain death. Won't be pretty. I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you.
On Monday, Trump shifted the goalpost.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave one more reason for launching the strike first.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Donald Trump came to power promising there won't be any wars, but has started one, which, if it does not end soon, could probably become the mother of all wars, drawing in the entire Gulf. What can bring Iran, a country which has lost its leader, back to negotiating table? Nobody seems to have the answer. Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, let's raise the big question once again tonight. Is Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu in particular driving this war now, and Donald Trump simply tagging along? Is Donald Trump constantly changing the goalposts with no clear endgame in mind? Is war a weapon of mass distraction for Donald Trump from his domestic troubles? And joining me now from Washington, D.C. is a special guest joined by Mehdi Hasan, Editor-in-Chief and CEO of ZTO News, one of the world's leading opinion makers, sharp opinions as always. Mehdi, appreciate you joining us. You're joining us on a day when we are hearing news of unprecedented attacks once again on Tehran, possibility of a building where the assembly to elect a successor to Ali Khamenei were meeting. How do you see this? Israel and the United States now relentless in their attacks. Do you really believe Iran can hold out?
It is a big question of our time. We are in a very, very dangerous moment for the world, for the region. We're all affected by this, a massive escalation in the Middle East. a completely unnecessary, unprovoked war, a war of aggression against Iran, whatever your views of Iran. And people can be very critical, as I am, of Iran's government, of its human rights record, whatever you want to be critical of, its nuclear program. This was a war of aggression, a war of choice launched by the United States and Israel. They've all but admitted it. Their rationales keep shifting by the day as to why they're bombing Iran. We're talking, Rajdeep, on a day where Donald Trump says, well, it's too late to talk. Even though on Sunday he said he wanted to talk. So they're all over the place. As you say, we're escalating. More and more targets are getting hit. They've already killed the head of state, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, on day one. Completely illegal under international law. And they've got no strategy to end this. They've got no end goal in sight. They've not explained to the American public or the wider international community as to why they are doing it and when they plan to stop. And we're seeing it escalate around the region. Americans are being asked to leave the Middle East. People are being killed in Gulf countries. Lebanon now is facing an Israeli ground invasion as we speak. 50 people killed in Lebanon, 750 people killed in Iran, people killed in Israel. The whole thing is a disaster.
You're saying it's a disaster, but when I speak to Israeli guests or indeed American guests close to the establishment, they say this is a just war. That's the word that's being used, a just war to stop Iran from exporting terror or becoming a nuclear country that can destabilize the region and the world.
So some of us who studied philosophy and theology in university will remember the criteria for a just war is that it has to be a last resort, has to be an act of self-defense. All other options have to be exhausted. That clearly wasn't the case. Rajdeep, you don't have to take my word for it. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, stood in Congress yesterday, spoke to reporters and said the imminent threat, this is the legal justification for their attack, the imminent threat was not against the US, as many of us pointed out it wasn't. He said that Israel was planning to attack Iran, and because America knew Israel was planning to attack Iran, America had to attack first, because once Israel attacked Iran, Iran would attack America. Think about the illogicality of that position. Rather than just stop Israel from illegally attacking Iran, America decided we will attack first and say it's an imminent threat on us. As even senior Democratic Party lawmakers are saying now, Rajdeep, even pro-Israel Democrats are openly saying an imminent threat to Israel is not a threat against the United States. Our country is not the same as Israel. Israel's interests are not America's interests. And I think that's becoming a very fascinating political debate here in the US, the shifting terrain on America's relationship with Israel. Of course, Israeli politicians are going to tell you that this is good for them. They've been wanting to take out Iran for decades. Benjamin Netanyahu admitted just yesterday, I've been yearning, he said, dreaming of doing this for 40 years. Donald Trump is the first president to agree. Don't forget, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Joe Biden, multiple American presidents, Barack Obama, said no when Netanyahu told them to bomb Iran. When George W. Bush and Dick Cheney thought Iran was a step too far, think about how extreme this step is that Donald Trump has taken in his second term for Netanyahu's sake, and I would argue as a distraction from his domestic economic woes and the release of the Epstein files.
Now, you're making an important point. You're claiming that Donald Trump, at least partly, has been driven by the fact to make this a weapon of mass distraction, if I may use that word, from the economic crisis, the Epstein files, and that it is Netanyahu who's leading the aggression, and Donald Trump has chosen to play ball in a way previous American presidents have not. What really has changed? Is it just simply the way Donald Trump is in comparison to his predecessors? Here is a president who has simply no time for the international rules-based order. That's why he's chosen to go along.
Oh, 100%. He has no interest. Other presidents have also, let's just be clear, Rajdeep, other American presidents have also violated international law and the rules-based order. But at least they've pretended that they care about it. They've paid some lip service to it. And as I mentioned, even some of our most hawkish American presidents, George W. Bush, did not bomb Iran. Donald Trump is someone who doesn't care about international law. He doesn't care about national sovereignty. He's a very imperialist-style president. You know, we're taking America back 50, 100, 150 years. We saw what he did in Venezuela at the start of the year. He illegally went in and abducted the sitting president from his bed with his wife and declared himself, Trump declared himself, acting president of Venezuela. He says he now controls and rules Venezuela. He says he wants to take Greenland away from the Europeans, away from Denmark, completely in violation of international law, the UN and NATO. And of course, so Iran is something, it was very easy for Netanyahu to get Donald Trump to do this. And look, this is not just me saying this. The New York Times has a big piece on how Trump went to war, big deep dive. And their opening paragraph, Rajdeep, the opening paragraph begins with Benjamin Netanyahu walked into the Oval Office in February to make sure that Donald Trump stays on a path to war. Netanyahu went on Fox last night on Sean Hannity's show and just laughed maniacally when Hannity said, people say that you made Trump do this. It is very clear that this is a war for Israel. What American national interest is there? 6 American service members have been killed. Who's going to tell their families they died for nothing? Gas and oil prices are going up in a country where affordability and price rises, inflation has already been a huge political controversy. And of course, all of our allies, the Gulf allies, are seeing that the US is not a protector of the Gulf. If you're in the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain, you used to look at the US for protection. They were your shield. Now you're getting bombed by Iran and the Americans can't protect you?
No, but if this all results eventually in the regime change that Donald Trump seems to suggest or seems to hope it will, then Donald Trump could well claim victory. I've been trying to understand whether there is an end game. I've been asking a number of guests. No one has clarity on that. Do you see an end game if Donald Trump is able to put in place in Iran someone who he believes will toe the line of the American-Israel axis? Is that the end game?
So a few things there. Number one, my colleague Swin Subsang here at Zeteo has been reporting from his sources inside the administration that they went into this war with no end game at all. They're trying to work it out in retrospect. After dropping the bombs, they're now trying to work out what is the end strategy, what is the exit strategy, which is a bizarre way to go to war, of course. And this is an administration that is full of incompetent people. Let's just be very clear. In fact, Trump himself admitted, Rajdeep, I don't know if you saw, he said, we did have a plan to replace Khamenei. We had a number 2 and number 3 we had picked, but they got killed as well in the initial bombing. Imagine they killed the people they had wanted to replace Khamenei. That's the kind of incompetence with which they're bombing Iran. Number 2, you say regime change could be the end goal. Well, as I said at the start of the interview, the end goal keeps changing. On the one hand, Donald Trump says regime change. Then he says, no, it's not about the regime. They can stay as long as they get rid of the nuclear program. Then they say, well, it's not about nuclear program. It's about freeing the Iranian people. Then they say, well, actually, it's about the ballistic missiles. They're all over the place when it comes to their actual goal. Everyone can see that. Finally, I would say, we don't know what regime change looks like in Iran. The American record on a regime change is a disaster. Should we talk about Iraq? Should we talk about Afghanistan, where the Taliban are back in charge? Should we talk about Libya, which is a failed state today? Syria, Venezuela, he just took out the president but kept in the rest of the government, didn't bring in the quote-unquote democratic opposition. My worry for Iran is that you don't just lose this government and then have some happy democracy or even the return of the Shah's son. You actually get a civil war in Iran. You actually get a failed state in Iran, which is, by the way, Rajdeep, what the Israelis want. The Israelis don't want a strong Iran. They don't want a strong Iraq. The Israelis want to be in a neighborhood where they're surrounded by Middle East countries which are fighting internally, which are torn apart internally. Your Lebanons, your Syrias, your Iraqs. That's what they want because they then get to be the top dog in the region.
There is a much of what you're saying, surely the American public out there knows, the changing of the goalposts, the fact that American soldiers have lost their lives, the fact that there have been warnings, including in that NYT article from Trump's military advisor who made it clear that there could be several casualties. All of this is known to the American people, to Congress. Why is there not a greater pushback? Why is there seemingly not a greater pushback when there is this brazen violation seemingly of international law taking place, or as I said, the constant changing of goalposts that could involve the loss of lives?
Well, it's not just international law that's being violated, it's the US Constitution. The US Constitution demands that Congress vote on war. Congress authorizes a war. A president cannot take America into war without congressional authorization. There is an exception under what's called the War Powers Act that allows the president to use force for 60 days without getting congressional approval if there's an imminent threat to the US. And the intelligence community has made it clear that there was no imminent threat to the US from Iran. Iran was not about to attack America. No one truly believes that. The public are against this war. What's so fascinating, Rajdeep, is that prior to this war, only 1 in 4 Americans supported hitting Iran. Only 1 in 4 Americans. Now, normally when America goes to war, the minute the bombs drop, the minute American soldiers are in harm's way, the American public becomes very hawkish, immediately falls into line behind whatever foreign misadventure Bush or Obama or whoever it is takes them on. In this case, Rajdeep, for the first time in my lifetime, in living memory, the American public has not switched. In the polls that have been taken since Saturday, the majority are still against this war. So he's ignoring public opinion. Trump told the New York Post on Monday, I don't care about the polls. He's ignoring public opinion, but there are midterm elections coming up in November. They were already on course to lose those elections, the Republicans. This will only cement that. And by the way, Democrats finally are speaking up. We're seeing for the first time even feckless, spineless Democrats, even those who are in the pro-Israel camp, are coming out and saying, you know what, we should not be fighting this war. This is an illegal war. This is something that's unconstitutional. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, very moderate mainstream Democrat, very pro-Israel guy, he came out yesterday and said, why did we kill 160 schoolgirls for Israel and Netanyahu's sake? And I think those questions are going to keep getting asked.
If those questions are going to get asked, what happens next? What's your sense? With Donald Trump, we never know what happens next. Do you believe that he will call a early halt to the war and claim victory? Or as he said yesterday, this could go on for weeks. Do you believe this has become an ego thing about it? There are lots of conspiracy theories also that about backroom deals that have been struck. What's your sense? I know it's tough to predict what an unpredictable Trump will do, but what would you hazard? What happens next, given, as you're saying, that there is slowly a pushback even in America?
Anyone who makes predictions in Trump's Washington, D.C. is crazy, because this is a man who doesn't even know what he's going to do any day he wakes up in the morning. As you say, Donald Trump could either end this war today and declare victory, mission accomplished style like George W. Bush, or it could drag on for weeks. I suspect I would lean more towards some kind of fake declaration of victory, because one thing we know about Trump, Rajdeep, he's not anti-war. This was a myth that Trump would be an anti-war candidate. He likes bombing countries. He bombed 7 countries in 2025, his first year in office. He launched more strikes than Joe Biden launched over 4 years in his first year. He likes bombing countries. What he doesn't like is prolonged conflicts, the quagmire of Iraq. What he always claimed to oppose was a long occupation of Iraq, of Afghanistan. He doesn't want to get stuck in Iran, even though they're talking about ground troops now. He likes the Venezuela-type conflict. You go in the middle of the night, bang, 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 made for television. You pull Maduro out with a bag over his head, and you go, ha-ha, look at that. That was amazing. It's like a Hollywood action movie. That's what this guy likes. He's a former reality TV star. This is what he enjoys. He's not some strategist, some geopolitical forecaster. This is something he got pushed into. This is something he doesn't actually care about deep down. He's now committed. He's got a massive ego, probably bigger than any person has ever had in the White House. So he can't, of course, look like he's been defeated. But at some point, he will be defeated, either politically or maybe even militarily.
In a sense, therefore, as a final question, if you and I were to talk a month from now, do you believe that the war would still be on? Neither of us are military experts in that sense. We don't know what the capacity of Iran is to hold out. Iran is obviously trying to expand the theater of war to bring in other Gulf nations. As you mentioned, those Gulf nations also stand presumably cruelly exposed today. In a sense, their defenses have also got exposed. So a month from now, do you believe we will still be at war?
So not just Gulf nations, Rajdeep. There's reporting that South Korea is losing some of its American munitions and protection. It's being diverted to the Gulf. Gulf countries are seeing that America only cares about Israel. Its other allies ultimately will always be sacrificed at the altar of Israel. That's become very clear. Will it continue a month from now? I think, look, first of all, let's not underestimate the Iranian regime's tolerance of attack and bloodshed. This is a country that took 10 years of beating by Saddam Hussein, backed by the United States and France and other countries at the time. They lost 1 million people, including many to chemical attacks, from Saddam Hussein's army. This is a country whose religious leadership, as Marco Rubio pointed out, is a Shia clerical leadership which venerates martyrdom, which, sees martyrdom as the ultimate goal. Khamenei became a martyr. They made Khamenei a martyr. They gave him what he wanted. So I think they have quite a long tolerance, actually, for enduring bombs and bullets and attacks from America and Israel, especially if they carry on hitting back as they are now. Whether that lasts a month, 6 months, a year, let me just say this, Rajdeep. One thing I've learned, unfortunately, from my 46 years on this planet, watching wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, is there's a long tail to this stuff. You don't know when it's over. The West doesn't get to decide when wars are over. George Bush stood on an aircraft carrier and said, mission accomplished in May of 2003, just a couple of months after toppling Saddam. We know what happened in Iraq for that decade and a half later. We know what happened in Afghanistan. 20 years later, the Taliban was back in office. Some of our opponents, especially in the Middle East, they think in terms of decades. Unfortunately, the US political media class thinks in terms of weeks, and that is the real disconnect.
Let's therefore leave it at that, Mehdi. Maybe we'll get back to you not after a decade, but maybe after a month or so, and get a sense of what impact this war has had, because clearly it's destabilized large parts of the world like never before. And I think you've given us a sense of what Donald Trump is about. I just wonder how you get away with saying some of the things you do in a Trumpian world. But I guess more power to you. You must get under his skin.
Well, some might say a lot about the Indian journalists who get under Narendra Modi's skin. We're living in a world where democratic journalists in democracies like India and America have to keep speaking out to value the importance of free speech, especially at a time of war when dissent is so important.
Let me leave it at that. I appreciate you joining me, Mehdi. Thanks so much for joining me here on the news today. And I thought we should focus on the Indian position because India has finally broken its silence on the escalating war in West Asia, calling for restraint and diplomacy. This even as the opposition questions the government's refusal to condemn the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. What's happening with the Indian situation? Take a look.
Oh my God.
India issues its first detailed reaction to the escalating war in West Asia. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs on Tuesday said India had already urged all sides to exercise restraint, avoid escalation, and prioritize the safety of civilians. It noted that in the recent days, destruction and deaths have mounted, even as normal life and economic activities come to a halt. The MES said there are almost 1 crore Indian citizens who live and work in the Gulf region, and the safety and well-being of Indians is of utmost priority. The MEA added that trade and energy supply chains also traverse this geography, and any major disruption has serious consequences for the Indian economy. The ministry said some Indian nationals have lost their lives or are missing in the war. India strongly reiterated its call for dialogue and diplomacy. Over the past 2 days, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reached out to leaders of the UAE, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait and Qatar. On Monday, he had called for talks and restoration of peace.
विश्व में चल रहे अनेक तनावों को लेकर भारत की सोच स्पष्ट ही है। हमने सदैव शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखने का आह्वान किया है। भारत डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के माध्यम से सभी विवादों का समाधान का समर्थन करता है।
The Modi government's silence on the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is being questioned by the opposition. In an article in a newspaper, Congress MP Sonia Gandhi pointed out that the government has refrained from condemning the assassination of Khamenei or the violation of Iranian sovereignty. She said the massive unprovoked attacks by Israel and the US happened in the midst of dialogue. She went on to say that silence in this instance is not neutral but abdication. Sonia Gandhi also said the assassination was carried out without a formal declaration of war. She added that barely 48 hours before the assassination, Prime Minister had returned from a visit to Israel. Sonia Gandhi claimed that India's high-profile political endorsement of Benjamin Netanyahu's government without moral clarity marks a visible and troubling departure. India's stance is signaling tactic endorsement of this tragedy, she added. The government's priority at present is assuring the safety of 1 crore Indians living in the Gulf. Most of the Indian students stuck in Tehran have been moved out of the city. Now, if the war gets prolonged, it will also pose serious challenges to the fastest growing large economy of the world. Bureau Report, India Today.
What role should India play in this war? Will the Hormuz blockade, the Straits of Hormuz being affected, hit the economy, especially India's oil purchases? Is the Gulf losing the safe haven status that it has? Lots of questions to answer. Syed Akbaruddin, former permanent representative of India to the UN, someone who's worked across the region, including Saudi Arabia, including Iran. I appreciate Akbaruddin, you joining me. From an Indian perspective, you've heard the Prime Minister today reach out to different Gulf neighbors once again, Gulf countries once again, spoken to the King of Jordan, speaking to other affected countries. Do you believe that this outreach is the right way to do this, or should we be, in a way, calling out what some believe is now an unprovoked, unnecessary, disproportionate war that Israel and US are calling out? Why the reluctance to call out the US and Israel? Do you believe that's the right approach?
So thank you very much, Rajdeep, for having me on your show. So West Asia is not a distant theater for India. It's part of our proximate neighborhood, if I may say. For India, the Gulf is not a foreign policy file only. It's an economic and human security reality. Our energy flows, oil, LNG, LPG, aviation fuel come from there in significant measure. So any increase in prices due to the closure of sea lanes will have an impact on our budgetary lines, on our bottom lines. And there's the safety of nearly 9 million Indians in the region, where we have a direct stake. So India's approach is not going to be a pure norms, values first posture. It's likely to be a more hedged norms posture. And the logic is pretty simple. Diplomacy must be calibrated rather than doctrinaire. So you see the way that we are responding. We are not doing it in a very manner of vocal symmetry. But in crisis, you speak first where your people and your economic interests lie and where they are most exposed. So calibrated diplomacy provides options and rhetoric closes them. So I'm not one for having a rhetorical approach.
So you're saying it was the right, because this has become part of domestic politics. The opposition, large sections of it, including Sonia Gandhi, interestingly today questioning why has the government been so silent on the assassination of a head of state like Ali Khamenei, someone who may have been anti-India in his positions on Kashmir, but at the end of the day is a head of state. That international rules demand that you can't just take out a head of state with this kind of an external strike. That's immoral, illegal. How do you respond? Has India done the right thing by not openly condemning the US and Israel at any stage so far?
So Rajdeep, let's first acknowledge that our ties with Iran are historic, are traditional, and are deep. And many Indians feel a sense of civilizational affinity and strong cultural bonds with Iran. And of course, the killing of Iran's supreme leader in military strikes is seen by many as a grave breach of accepted norms. Now, what the government wants to answer, perhaps it'll answer for itself, because I'm not the spokesperson right now. I have no knowledge of the inner thinkings of the government. And as Mrs. Sonia Gandhi herself said, that perhaps the best place for this is to discuss it in Parliament. But that said, I think the important thing is for us to ensure that we prevent the next strike. And that is what matters rather than condemning the last one. India is not there to win applause. It has to work to protect lives, its own interests. And the Ministry of External Affairs has already said that sovereignty and restraint and territorial integrity remain our core principles. But we have other priorities. So I think
but there
what
is,
the government has to say, it will say.
So to those who say that we've taken a picture side, we are veering closer and closer with every passing year or month towards the Israel-US axis, that in a way limits our options. You don't agree with that. You believe that we are in a multi-aligned world, so we are having strong relations with the Gulf states. At the same time, we build this strong equation with Israel. You believe that's the way forward? Have we embraced Israel and the US to the extent that we have no strategic autonomy now in the region?
Rajdeep, engagement should not be confused with alignment. We need to separate the optics from the policy. Yes, the Prime Minister was in Israel a few days before the strikes took place, but that doesn't make India complicit in what followed. Critics, crises erupt between meetings. And if diplomacy meant endorsing every subsequent action of a partner, no country would maintain a relationship with anybody.
So you don't agree
I
with
don't
the
think-
views expressed by some of my previous guests in earlier program that this visit was ill-timed in any way?
No, I don't think India can afford to be part of any bloc in West Asia. Our job is much more measured. It's much more focused, and we need narrow diplomacy for that. And that narrow diplomacy can only be if we keep all lines open, rather than think that we need applause lines. So it's easy for people to come on television and say that. But
Right. So
in
you're
the real
saying
world,
you're saying it would be unfair to say that the visit was ill-timed. We have to carry on engaging the Gulf states, UAE, for example. We're building a strong relationship and we continue to engage with Israel, and both are possible. They're not mutually exclusive. Am I correct? And Iran itself. Remember the Chabahar port. I mean, while Iran has been critical on India's position on Kashmir, for example, or Iran has been seen to echo almost Pakistan's position at times on Kashmir, the Chabahar port was an important access for us to Central Asia.
So Rajdeep, I think government's actions should be judged by outcomes rather than look at it at the middle of a process or at the beginning of the process. What we need to see is, can India speak and engage with all sides? And that they have done. The Ministry of the External Affairs Minister has talked to his Iranian counterpart. Prime Minister has talked to all the leaders of the Gulf. The Ministry of External Affairs, in its first statement itself, said that for us, territorial integrity and sovereignty is important. So we need to see whether they're talking to all sides. Can they help in reducing the escalation risk? Can they protect our citizens? Can they ensure the economic lifelines? All this will require access, not alignment. And we need to judge India's policy by its results of whether the markets are steady, whether the Indians are safer, and whether a diplomatic off-ramp can be there and India can support that, rather than these applause lines that people come and say in public, because quiet diplomacy is also part of substantive diplomacy. We need to we need to put some brakes on this momentum of war and hyper talk.
No, I take your point. I take your point over quiet diplomacy prevailing over optics. But then when you go to Israel and are seen to be embracing it, almost calling it fatherland, do we have to be conscious that on the Arab street, or indeed even in an Iran, that will be seen very differently? Do we need to be conscious of that as well? That you can't be seen to be embracing Netanyahu at a time when he's reviled in large parts of West Asia, certainly on the street, if not by the leaderships.
So Rajdeep, again, you're mixing up optics with substance. So yes, what you say may be valid in some parts of the world, but I've served in the Gulf. Many of the Gulf states speak or sing from the same hymn sheet that the Israelis sing towards Iran. So let's not be thinking that, oh, the Arab street. And we know what the Arab street in the Gulf is, Rajdeep. So let's understand that our outcomes will be decided not on optics. And give the government a chance and space to work it out. And let's discuss this when Parliament convenes or when there is greater space, rather than putting every action under a magnifying glass and saying, oh, I could have done this better. Sure, everybody can do this.
Finally, do you believe India is taken therefore seriously across the region, that because also of the large population that we have soft power across the region in countries like UAE again, because of the presence of so many Indian workers, that therefore we have a role to play?
So Rajdeep, when I first served in the Gulf, there were about 1 million Indians there. Today there are 10 million. Our economy, our trade with the Gulf was something like 2 or 3 million 2 or 3 billion totally, all the Gulf countries. Today, if you look at it, it's 170. Obviously, we are a major player there. People take us seriously. To be fair, also, India has invested a lot in deepening ties with the Gulf in an unprecedented manner. And that's not because of ideological affinity. It's because our interests have converged. And if interests converge, there are people who take each other seriously. And I think the India of today is certainly taken seriously in the Gulf. And let's see first the safety of our people and the economic ties are protected. Everything comes secondary to this.
Okay. I'm going to leave it there, Syed Akbaruddin. You are a voice of reason amidst the noise around us. And obviously, in the difficult, polarized times we live in, to navigate with quiet diplomacy, not easy. We'll wait and see what the outcomes are. But for now, for joining me, thank you so much. Syed Akbaruddin, on what India's role could be as the war escalates. Now, one of the questions that we've raised is the Straits of Hormuz. The Iranians have been very clear that they're using it to effect a blockade that will affect oil prices and thereby perhaps create further economic dislocation. It's one of the weapons that it has, while declaring this narrow waterway closed and warning it will target any ship that goes through it. About 20% of global oil moves through there, and India is one of the beneficiaries of the oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. My colleague Karishma Asudani has this explainer now.
The United States and Israel's war with Iran has spilled over into the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical energy choke points, prompting a surge in oil prices. Shipping through the strait, which carries 1/5 of the oil consumed globally, as well as large quantities of gas, has ground to a near halt amid Iranian attacks on oil tankers in the region. A commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps said on Monday that the strait was closed and that any vessel attempting to pass through the waterway would be set ablaze. For India, which depends heavily on Middle East crude oil, this could translate into higher fuel prices, inflationary pressures, and economic instability. The Strait of Hormuz lies between the Iran and Oman, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea. At its narrowest, it's just 33 kilometers wide, with shipping lanes barely 3 kilometers wide in each direction. Despite its size, roughly 20% of the world's oil and gas supply passes through this corridor daily, about, say, 20 to 21 million barrels of crude. It is also a vital route for liquefied natural gas, particularly from Qatar. This makes it one of the most strategically important trade arteries in the world. Most oil exports from OPEC producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, and the Iran move through this strait, particularly to Asia. Qatar sends almost all its LNG exports through these waters. Even the threat of disruption is enough to send prices soaring. Brent crude has already surged sharply amid fears of escalation, with analysts warning that a prolonged closure could push prices beyond $100 billion. And in extreme cases, it could actually go to $150 per barrel. Oil markets are forward-looking. Traders price in risk. When tankers halt, insurers cancel coverage, and freight rates hit record highs. The impact is immediate, even if the strait is not formally declared closed. Indian refiners are considering alternative crude oil sourcing options that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. The refiners are also considering oil on water options.
The oil factor, just one of the many factors that is being influenced by this escalating war in West Asia. Well, that's about all that we could pack in today. It's Holi again in parts of the country tomorrow, so it's a two-day holiday for many of you, and also the World T20 semi-finals begin tomorrow. So we've got plenty to cheer, but as you cheer, do think about those innocent civilians in particular who are today in a war zone. Is this an unnecessary, unprovoked war or a just war? You, the viewer, need to decide. We'll keep getting you voices from across the spectrum. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubh Ratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar.